The mind is a labyrinth, its walls shifting, its floors treacherous. What if you could not trust your thoughts, your perceptions, or even the very fabric of reality itself? The paradoxes you are about to encounter are not mere intellectual curiosities. They are mental traps, designed to unsettle, to twist the very foundation of what you believe about existence. Welcome to the descent. Are you ready to question everything? The ship of Theseus. Imagine standing before a ship, a massive vessel, aged by the sea and the passage of time. Its hull is scarred, weathered by years of relentless saltwater and wind. But this ship, though ancient, has served its purpose well. It's more than just a ship, it's an icon of journeys taken, of history written on its very frame. But then, one day, a single plank of wood is replaced, as the ship is brought into port for repairs. The old piece is taken out, and a new one is installed. It seems like a minor change, but over the years, more and more of the ship's planks are replaced. One by one, each part, every piece that once defined the ship, is swapped for something new, until nothing remains of the original ship. But here's the real question: is it still the same ship? You think you know the answer. Of course, it's still the same ship. It feels the same, looks the same. It sails on the same waters, follows the same course. But does it really remain the same? What if this ship is constantly changing, one plank at a time? Does its identity shift with every replacement? At what point does it stop being the ship of Theseus? Now, let's take it further. What if all those old planks, the ones that were replaced, are gathered together and reassembled into a new ship? Which of these two ships is the true ship of Theseus? The one made of completely new parts, or the one built from the original pieces? This question is not just about ships. It's about the very nature of identity, of self. Look at yourself. Your body, much like the ship, is constantly being replaced. Cells die and regenerate. Your skin sheds, your blood replenishes. Are you still the same person you were a year ago? A decade ago? Your thoughts, your experiences, your memories, they are constantly changing, yet you still call yourself you. But, are you? And when you look in the mirror, do you see the same person who was there yesterday? Or is the face you look at an illusion, a mask covering a constantly evolving being? This paradox forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth about who we are, and what makes us us. If your body is entirely different after a period of time, are you still the same person, or just an accumulation of new cells and experiences? And if you are always changing, can you ever truly return to who you once were? But there's something darker at play here. As you stand before the ship of Theseus, you might ask yourself, if I can change so much, so completely, can I ever really know who I am? Are you still the same, or are you merely the shadow of your former self? The liar paradox. You walk into a room and hear a voice say, "I am lying." The words hang in the air, unsettling, twisting. If they are true, then they are false. But if they are false, then they must be true. Which is it? This paradox, simple in its phrasing, quickly unfurls into a mental trap. The statement, "I am lying," cannot be true without contradicting itself. If it's true, then the speaker is lying, which would make the statement false. But if it's false, then the speaker must be telling the truth, yet they are lying. You are trapped in an endless loop, where truth and falsehood are indistinguishable, and the more you try to resolve it, the more your mind spirals into confusion. This is more than a linguistic trick. It's a direct assault on the very idea of truth. How can you trust anything if it is all self-contradictory? In a world where truth can't even be defined without unraveling itself, what hope do we have of ever knowing what is real? Every time you try to pinpoint a truth, you encounter the same paradox. Does this make you any less real? Are your thoughts somehow false because they are paradoxical, shifting under the weight of your own reasoning? As you ponder, the walls begin to close in. The liar paradox is not just a puzzle, it's an echo of the ever-shifting nature of perception, of reality itself. If you cannot trust truth, what can you trust? Zeno's paradoxes. Consider an arrow, drawn taut in its bow, ready to fly toward its target. The arrow takes flight, cutting through the air. But, according to Zeno's paradox, it never reaches its destination. Why? Because before it reaches the target, it must first travel halfway to it. But before it travels halfway, it must travel halfway to that point. And so on, infinitely. The arrow, caught in an endless sequence of halfway points, will never reach its goal. This paradox is not about arrows, it's about motion, time, and the limitations of perception. Zeno forces you to confront the uncomfortable truth that motion, like time, may be an illusion. If the arrow can never reach its target, how can we ever truly arrive at anything? Every step is divided into an infinite number of smaller steps, and every step takes us further into an endless loop, where the destination is always just out of reach. Time, too, is caught in this paradox. We measure it in moments, in seconds, but each second is made up of smaller moments, infinitely divided. When do you truly live in time? When do you experience a moment, or are you always falling short, trapped between the halves, the quarters, the infinitesimal pieces that cannot be grasped? The bootstrap paradox. Imagine stepping into a time machine and traveling back to the past, where you hand a young Shakespeare a copy of his works. Shakespeare, inspired by what you've given him, publishes these works, and you read them, traveling back again to give them to him. Who wrote the works? Shakespeare. Or you, the time traveler, who gave him the works in the first place? This paradox reveals the terrifying emptiness of causality. If the works exist without a clear origin, then where does causality end? Every event seems to loop back on itself, creating an endless cycle with no beginning or end. The more you dig into the bootstrap paradox, the more you find that your very existence, your actions, your thoughts, your decisions, are just parts of an unbreakable loop. What happens when you realize that every decision you make is already a result of a previous decision? If there is no origin, then nothing truly begins. You are merely caught in an infinite cycle. How can you ever know if you are truly free, or if your every action has already been written? The grandfather paradox. Now, imagine traveling back in time to the moment your grandfather is a young man. You know that in the future, he will marry, have children, and ultimately become your grandfather. But in a moment of madness, or perhaps logic, you prevent him from ever meeting your grandmother. Without their union, your parents can never be born, and you can never exist. This is the grandfather paradox, an impossible situation where you are faced with the eerie question: can you undo your own existence? If you prevent your own birth, can you still exist to make that decision? The logical contradiction spirals, and as you try to understand it, you realize, if you're never born, then you never traveled back in time, and the events that caused you never to exist never occurred. But if you never existed, how could you have traveled back in time? Time is no longer linear. It's not a path you can follow, but a twisted knot. Are we the result of our actions, or are our actions merely the result of a twisted, unbreakable knot of time? As you try to escape, the paradox digs its claws deeper into your mind. The twin paradox. You and your twin stand side by side. You are both the same age, the same person, but one of you gets into a spaceship and travels at nearly the speed of light. When the traveler returns, decades have passed for everyone on Earth, but they haven't aged a day. Meanwhile, their twin, left behind, has aged significantly. How can this be? How can time itself be so warped that two people, living the same life, experience it differently? The answer lies in relativity, but it also lies in a question you can't escape. What is time, if it can bend and warp in such a way? What does it mean for you to exist in one place, only for time to continue without you, while your twin experiences life in a different frame? The paradox brings you face to face with the terrifying implications of time dilation. If time is relative, then what does it mean to live in the present? Are we simply prisoners of our own perception of time, unable to break free from its flow? And if time can stretch, bend, and compress, then what does that say about the future? Is it something that happens to us, or something we have already traveled through? Can you ever truly be in the present moment, or are you always being dragged through time, a prisoner of its endless march? The barber paradox. In a small town, there is a barber who shaves all those, and only those, who do not shave themselves. The town follows this rule with perfect precision. Every man who doesn't shave himself must go to the barber. But then, one day, you ask, who shaves the barber? The barber cannot shave himself, because he only shaves those who don't shave themselves. But if he doesn't shave himself, then according to the rule, he must shave himself. You are left in a paradox. How can the barber shave himself if he is only supposed to shave those who don't shave themselves? This is more than a trivial puzzle. This paradox reveals something deeper about our logical systems. What happens when rules collapse under their own weight? What happens when a system that seems so simple becomes completely self-contradictory? As you reflect on the paradox, you realize that the barber, trapped in a loop of contradiction, is a reflection of something more unsettling. Are we all trapped by rules that we cannot escape? Systems of logic, belief, and even society itself are built on premises that sometimes don't hold. If the barber cannot exist within the boundaries of his own rule, then how can we trust the systems that we are so deeply entrenched in? What rules govern your life, and what happens when they collapse upon themselves, leaving you with nothing but contradiction and confusion? The unexpected hanging paradox. A condemned prisoner is told by a judge that he will be hanged at noon on one weekday, but the execution will be a surprise to him. He will not know the day of the hanging until the executioner arrives. The prisoner begins to think through the judge's words, trying to deduce the day of his death. It can't happen on Friday, because then the hanging wouldn't be a surprise. So, he rules out Friday. Then he rules out Thursday, because if he hasn't been hanged by Wednesday, then Thursday becomes the only remaining option, and the hanging wouldn't be a surprise. This reasoning continues, and the prisoner concludes that he cannot be hanged on any day. But when the executioner arrives on Wednesday, the prisoner is shocked. The hanging is a surprise, exactly as the judge had stated. How can this happen? This paradox isn't just about death or fate, it's about control, prediction, and the unsettling truth that, no matter how much we try to predict our future, there is always something we can't account for. The more we try to outsmart fate, the more we are caught in a web of uncertainty. What happens when our predictions fail us? Are we truly in control of our fate, or are we merely pawns in a game where the rules are beyond our understanding? And worse still, if the future is so unknowable, then how can you ever be sure of your place in it? Each moment is a surprise, each decision a roll of the dice, and yet we pretend we can predict it all. But can we? The Fermi paradox. The universe is vast. So vast that it stretches beyond the edge of comprehension. Scientists estimate there are over 100 billion stars in our galaxy alone, and countless other galaxies scattered across the universe. With so many stars, so many planets, why haven't we found any evidence of intelligent extraterrestrial life? This is the Fermi paradox. Given the sheer size and age of the universe, statistically speaking, we should have encountered other civilizations by now. Yet, after decades of searching, the silence is deafening. This silence is not just a scientific puzzle, it's a psychological one. What does it mean that, in this boundless universe, we are so utterly alone? The universe seems to taunt us with the possibility of other life, but no signs ever appear. If intelligent life exists elsewhere, why are we not hearing from it? And if we are truly alone, then what does that say about the nature of existence itself? As the paradox grows darker, it raises a chilling question. If there are no others out there, then what are we? Alone in a vast, uncaring cosmos, with no sign of intelligent life for millions of light years in every direction. Are we the only consciousness, doomed to live, to wonder, and then to die, without ever knowing if anyone else exists? The Sorites paradox. The Sorites paradox, also known as the paradox of the heap, begins with something simple, a heap of sand. You take away one grain of sand at a time. At what point does the heap stop being a heap? At first, it seems absurd. Removing a single grain of sand shouldn't change the nature of the heap. But as you continue to remove grains, you eventually reach a point where the heap no longer exists, yet the sand doesn't feel different. The paradox arises because there is no clear threshold. The heap is not a single, fixed entity. It's a continuous process, like all things in life. This paradox exposes the uncomfortable nature of categories and definitions. What makes a heap a heap? What defines a thing, a person, an experience? If you strip away enough, does it cease to be what it once was, even if nothing is noticeably different? How many grains of sand can you remove before the heap is gone? And what does it mean for your life, your identity, your very existence, if we are nothing more than a heap of experiences, waiting to be stripped away? The Monty Hall problem. You're standing in front of 3 doors. Behind one is a car, and behind the other 2 are goats. You pick a door, but before you open it, the host, Monty Hall, who knows where the car is, opens one of the other 2 doors, revealing a goat. Then Monty gives you the chance to switch your choice to the remaining door. The question is, should you switch, or stay with your original choice? Intuition may tell you that it doesn't matter, that your odds are 50-50. After all, there's one goat behind one door and a car behind the other. But the truth, dark and counterintuitive, is this: you should always switch. Why? Because when you picked your original door, the chance of choosing the car was only 1 in 3. Monty's reveal doesn't change the probability of your original pick. But it does give you an opportunity to take advantage of the fact that the remaining door now has a 2 in 3 chance of hiding the car. The game is rigged, but in a way that you can never escape. Now, think about it. Why is the truth so difficult to grasp? You've been given new information, but your mind insists that nothing has changed, that the odds should be the same. And yet, you're being led down a path, a hidden reality, where intuition betrays you. What does it say about how we perceive the world, when we can be so easily manipulated by a simple game of probability? Newcomb's paradox. In a small room, there are 2 boxes. One is transparent, and inside is $1,000. The other is opaque, and it contains either $1 million or nothing at all. You can choose to take just the opaque box, or take both boxes, the transparent box and the opaque box. The twist: a highly accurate predictor, who has observed you and knows your decision-making patterns, has already predicted whether you'll choose just the opaque box or both. If the predictor believes you'll take both boxes, the opaque box will be empty. If the predictor believes you'll only take the opaque box, it contains $1 million. The paradox is this: what should you do? The rational choice, according to traditional game theory, is to take both boxes. After all, the $1,000 is already there, and the $1 million is only dependent on what the predictor has decided. But the paradox lies in the fact that the predictor knows your choice ahead of time, making the rational choice irrational. The more you think about it, the deeper the trap becomes. What does it mean if your decisions can be predicted? And worse, what happens when you realize that you're not making the decision yourself, but are instead acting out a role that has already been decided? This paradox is an eerie reflection of our lack of control over our actions, where free will becomes a mere illusion, and the future is written by an observer who sees it all before we do. The omnipotence paradox. An all-powerful being exists, one who can do anything. But then, this being faces the following question: can an omnipotent being create a rock so heavy that even it cannot lift it? The paradox emerges in the moment of this question. If the being can create such a rock, then there's something it cannot do: lift the rock. But if the being cannot create such a rock, then there is something it cannot do: create the rock. Both answers create a contradiction. How can omnipotence exist in a way that doesn't allow for limits? This paradox eats away at the very concept of power itself. If power is limitless, then can it even be defined? Is it possible to hold infinite power, only to be trapped by the very definition of what it means to be powerful? The more you think about it, the more the walls of the universe close in, revealing the bleak truth: even omnipotence is a trap. The question lingers in the silence. What happens when we are confronted by a power so vast, so incomprehensible, that it reveals its own limitations? If there is no end to power, then where is the beginning? And can such power ever truly be free? The raven paradox. Consider the statement, all ravens are black. Now, imagine you observe a black raven. Your mind categorizes this as evidence supporting the statement, all ravens are black. But here's the paradox. Does seeing a green apple count as evidence for the statement, all ravens are black? It does, because the green apple is not a raven, and it contributes to proving that ravens are black by demonstrating what isn't a raven. This is the raven paradox. Evidence for a universal statement is not just what seems obviously related, but includes everything that is unrelated too. The more you think about it, the more unsettling it becomes. How much of the world can you truly trust if things that have no direct relation still somehow support the evidence for truth? What does it mean to know something? Is knowledge just the accumulation of direct evidence, or is it shaped by what isn't evidence, by the things that lie outside of our immediate perception? And if our understanding of the world is so fragile, then how can we ever truly know anything at all? The paradox of free will. You wake up, make decisions, walk through your day, convinced that each moment is an exercise in free will. But what if every decision you make, every choice, is already determined by forces beyond your comprehension? Biology, environment, genetics. Are you truly free, or are you merely acting out a script written before you even knew how to read? The paradox of free will doesn't just question whether we are free to act, it interrogates the very nature of freedom. If every action is influenced by factors beyond our control, can we ever really choose anything? And if we are not truly free, then what is left of our identity, our responsibility, our morality? As you stand before this paradox, the truth begins to unravel. Are you truly the author of your actions, or are you a character in a play you did not write, performing roles that were set before you even took the stage? You are no longer sure. The very notion of freedom starts to slip through your fingers like sand, and you are left to wonder, can freedom exist in a world that has already determined your every step? The prejudice paradox. You meet someone for the first time and form an opinion of them. Maybe it's their clothes, their demeanor, or a passing comment. Whatever it is, you think you understand them, at least on some level. But here's the paradox. The very fact that you formed this opinion means you have already prejudged them. Now, you might say, but I'm just trying to understand them. Yet, this very attempt to understand creates a bias in your perception. You have seen only a fragment of their personality, their life, and you've already built a narrative around them. This is the paradox. We can't truly understand others without making prejudgments, but by making prejudgments, we distort our understanding of them. So, are we ever free from prejudice? Every interaction is framed by the mental filters we have constructed, and the more we try to strip away bias, the more we realize that our efforts only reinforce it. Can you ever truly see someone for who they are, or are you always blinded by the lens of your own judgments? And worse still, what happens when you realize that, in judging others, you are unknowingly judging yourself, trapped in a cycle that distorts your view of both others and your own identity? The two envelopes paradox. You're given two envelopes. One contains twice as much money as the other. You're allowed to choose one envelope, but here's the catch. You don't know which one contains more. Now, after picking one envelope, you're faced with the dilemma. Should you switch envelopes? The reasoning goes like this. If the envelope you have contains $X, then the other envelope must contain either $2X or $X/2. This creates a paradox because, no matter what, the expected value of the other envelope is higher than what you have. It seems that no matter which envelope you choose, you should always switch. This sounds logical, but it quickly becomes unsettling. If every choice you make can be rationalized into a need to switch, then how can you ever be certain that you've made the right choice? You begin to see that choice itself, every action you take, every decision, is nothing but a game of probabilities, driven by uncertainty, leading you further down a rabbit hole where no decision can ever truly be final. In the end, you realize, the more you try to calculate your future, the more you realize that all your choices are based on the same flawed logic. Can you ever escape the endless cycle of choices and counter-choices, or are you forever trapped in a game with no resolution? The lottery paradox. Imagine you're in a lottery with a 1 in a million chance of winning. Statistically speaking, you should know your odds are incredibly low. Yet, you still buy the ticket. Why? The paradox isn't in the lottery itself. It's in your ability to justify the choice. You know the odds, but you buy the ticket anyway. The paradox lies in this tension. Your mind knows that the chances of winning are minimal, but you still act as if the possibility is real. Why? Because, in the face of such uncertainty, you believe that maybe this time, maybe just this one time, luck will be on your side. What does it mean when the odds are stacked against you, yet you can't stop yourself from playing the game? Is hope a rational choice, or is it a deception, a self-inflicted illusion to cope with the randomness of life? The deeper question is, if we know that the odds are against us, but continue to act as though they're not, then how much of our life is governed by irrational hope, rather than reason? The trolley problem. A trolley is speeding down a track. Ahead, 5 people are tied to the track, helpless. You stand at a lever that can divert the trolley to another track, where only one person is tied up. If you do nothing, the trolley will kill 5 people. If you pull the lever, it will kill 1. Do you pull the lever? This is the trolley problem, an ethical dilemma that confronts you with a choice that seems simple at first. Do you sacrifice 1 to save 5? But as you contemplate this, the situation becomes far more complex. Are you responsible for the death of the one person if you pull the lever? Is it worse to actively cause a death, or to let a death happen by inaction? The more you ponder, the more you realize, in trying to do the right thing, you might only be creating a different form of wrong. Now, imagine this. What if there's another person on the track who you don't know? What if you don't know if one of the 5 people is someone you love? Does the dilemma change, or do you keep the same cold logic, trying to save the most lives? The trolley problem forces you to confront the limitations of morality, and the paradox that there may be no right choice at all. You are trapped in a scenario that doesn't allow for any resolution, and each decision makes you question the very nature of ethics, sacrifice, and responsibility. What does it say about you if, in an effort to save lives, you choose who lives and who dies? The paradox of the grandfather's axe. The grandfather's axe is an old saying. A man inherits his grandfather's axe. Over the years, the axe's handle is replaced, and eventually, its blade is replaced too. But it is still called the grandfather's axe. The paradox is this: is it still the same axe, or is it now a different one entirely? What happens when all the parts of an object are replaced? What makes something the same? Is it its material components, or its identity? This paradox touches on the essence of continuity. Is the axe still the grandfather's, or has it evolved into something new, something different, over time? Now, consider this: you are constantly changing. Your body is not the same as it was a year ago. Your cells, your thoughts, your experiences, they're all in flux. Are you the same person you were yesterday, or have you been completely replaced, piece by piece? The grandfather's axe paradox challenges the very notion of identity and continuity. What does it mean to remain the same when everything that makes you who you are is constantly being replaced or evolving? And in this replacement, are you still the same person, or is something fundamental lost in the transformation? The paradox of choice. You walk into a store, and before you lies a shelf filled with hundreds of options. Cereal, toothpaste, shoes, coffee beans. Choices stretch before you like an endless horizon. You feel empowered by the vast selection, but as you begin to make a decision, a familiar sense of unease creeps in. Why is it so difficult to choose? This is the paradox of choice. The more options you have, the harder it becomes to make a decision. On the surface, it seems that more choices should make us happier. We should be free to pick the best option, the one that perfectly suits us. But the truth is more unsettling. The more choices we face, the more anxious we become. We weigh every possibility, fear missing out on something better, and second-guess ourselves. In the end, we often feel regretful, dissatisfied, as if we've missed something, even after making our decision. The paradox deepens. What happens when we believe that the perfect choice is always just out of reach? As you stare at the endless array of options, you begin to wonder, does having more choices truly give you freedom, or is it simply a trap that entangles you in the infinite possibility of what if? The crocodile paradox. A crocodile kidnaps a child and demands that the child's parents give him a ransom. The parents promise that they will pay the ransom, but the crocodile says, "I'll return the child to you if you can correctly guess whether I will return them or not." If they guess correctly, the child will be returned, but if they guess wrong, the child will be lost forever. The paradox is this: if the parents guess that the child will not be returned, then the crocodile must return the child, but this would contradict their guess, because they were wrong. If they guess that the child will be returned, then the crocodile cannot return the child without contradicting the parents' guess. This paradox is not just about logic. It is about control, about the way in which expectations and outcomes fold back on themselves. What happens when a promise, an expectation, or a choice is made in such a way that it cannot be fulfilled without violating the very conditions that created it? As you grapple with the paradox, you begin to feel a creeping sense of inevitability. What happens when you cannot escape from a trap of your own making, no matter which path you take? The paradox of two birds. Two birds stand on a branch. One bird takes off and flies away. The second bird waits. But this is the paradox. When did the first bird become a bird in flight, rather than simply a bird on the branch? Is the bird the same as it was when it was perched, or has its identity changed in the moment it begins to fly? The paradox of two birds forces us to question, what makes something what it is? The moment of change, the flight, the movement from stillness to action, seems to shift the bird's identity, yet the bird itself has not changed physically. Is the bird always a bird, regardless of where it is, or is its very essence tied to its motion? In our own lives, we too are constantly in motion, constantly changing. But when do we become something else? When do we become the person we are destined to be? When does the stillness of our current self evolve into something else, something we might not even recognize? Is it possible to know when you have shifted, or are you forever stuck in a transition, just like the bird that flies but is never quite the bird it once was? The drowning man paradox. A man is drowning in a river. A passerby comes to his aid, but before helping, the passerby asks the man, "Do you want to live or die?" The drowning man, in his panic, cannot answer with clarity. If he chooses life, he will be saved. If he chooses death, he will be left to drown. But here's the paradox. In the very act of asking, the passerby has already changed the outcome. The drowning man is no longer merely drowning. His choice has been thrust upon him. The paradox exists because the very question of, "Do you want to live or die?" demands a choice at a moment when the man is no longer in control. He is not asked for a rational decision, but one shaped by the urgency of the moment. This is the paradox of choice at its darkest. In asking, the passerby has taken control of the man's fate. What happens when we are asked to choose in the midst of helplessness? How much of our fate is truly our own, when the very questions we face are framed by forces beyond our control? In the end, the drowning man may have saved himself, but only through a choice that was never truly his to make. How often are we asked to choose in moments of panic, when the very question distorts our freedom? The time travel paradox. Imagine you build a time machine and travel to the past. You meet your younger self and, out of some sense of desperation or curiosity, you tell them everything that's going to happen, the choices they will make, the mistakes they will avoid, the future they will create. But here's the paradox. By revealing the future, you've already changed it. In doing so, you may alter the course of events, potentially preventing the very moment in which you traveled back in time to meet your younger self. If you change the past, then how can the future have led you to the past in the first place? This paradox is the ultimate trap, one that suggests that the more we try to control our future, the more we undermine the very structure that made the future possible. Is time a fixed path, or are we caught in a loop of endless alterations? When you look back at your life, can you ever be sure that you are the person you were meant to be? Or have you already rewritten your story countless times, each time making it more uncertain, more fragmented, more impossible to understand? Can you ever truly know your own past, or are you doomed to be forever lost in the fog of time, where nothing is certain and everything is shifting? The continuum paradox. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast expanse. In front of you stretches an infinite continuum, a line that extends forever. You look at it and ask yourself, how far does it go? The line never ends, yet your mind insists it must. It's not just an infinite distance, It's a paradoxical one, because the moment you think you've grasped its scope, the line eludes you, slipping beyond the limits of comprehension. The paradox arises when you attempt to measure the continuum. If it stretches infinitely, then how can we ever claim to have understood it? Every attempt to map it out leads to an ever-expanding horizon. If the continuum is infinite, then how can it ever be fully comprehended? This paradox is not just a question of space, it's a question of understanding itself. As you try to define the infinite, you are forced to confront the limits of your own perception. Can the human mind ever truly grasp the infinite, or are we trapped in an illusion, forever chasing something that can never be caught? The unexpected call paradox. You're waiting for an important phone call, perhaps a call that will change your life. The anticipation builds, each moment stretching further into uncertainty. You wait and wait. The call doesn't come. But then, the paradox reveals itself. The moment you stop waiting for the call is the moment it arrives. How can this be? The very act of anticipation seems to block the thing you desire. Why does the universe withhold what you want most until you cease to crave it? You've put yourself in a state of readiness, prepared for the moment of change, and yet, it never arrives until you let go of the very desire that summoned it. This paradox reflects a deeper truth. The more we chase something, the more it eludes us. The harder we try to control the future, the more it slips from our grasp. What does it mean to truly let go? Are we ever truly ready for what we desire? Or are we constantly locked in a struggle with the very thing we wish to possess? The ancient city paradox. An ancient city lies in ruin. Its walls are weathered, its streets cracked and empty, its history nearly forgotten. You walk through its desolate paths, and it feels as though time has stood still. But then, in the quiet, you hear a distant sound, a faint echo of life, as if the city is still alive, breathing, waiting. Here's the paradox. The city, though ancient and long abandoned, still exists in the mind of those who remember it. Its stones have crumbled, but its essence remains, preserved in memory. Is the city truly gone, or is it simply hidden beneath the surface, awaiting discovery? As you stand there, contemplating the city's past, you realize something unsettling. What happens when the past continues to live within you, even when you no longer have the power to alter it? The more you look, the more you see the city's ghost, whispering through the cracks in the stone. Are we ever free from the past, or are we simply prisoners of memories, walking in the shadow of those who came before us? The Sleeping Beauty paradox. A princess lies in a deep, enchanted sleep, cursed to remain asleep until a prince awakens her with a kiss. Time passes in the land, but the princess remains frozen in her slumber, untouched by the world. Then, one day, a prince arrives, kisses her, and she awakens. But here's the paradox. Did she ever truly sleep? The paradox lies in the fact that, from the moment she fell asleep to the moment she awoke, she never experienced the passing of time. In her sleep, did time pass for her at all? If she was unaware of it, did time even exist for her? The moment she awoke, she stepped into the present, but what had she missed? Was the time between her sleep and awakening real, or was it simply a gap, a void in her existence? This paradox forces us to confront the nature of consciousness, of awareness, and the passage of time. If we sleep through moments, do those moments still matter? And if we cannot perceive the passage of time, does it exist in the same way for us? Are we merely drifting through time, unconscious, waiting to awaken to the reality of our existence, or is it something more sinister, something that defines who we are in ways we cannot understand? The paradox of the Founding Fathers. The Founding Fathers of a nation write a constitution, a document that sets the rules for how the country will function. But here's the paradox. The very rules they set in place are designed to evolve, to allow for change, and yet those who created the rules are no longer here to alter them themselves. The paradox reveals itself in the fact that, by creating rules for future generations, the Founding Fathers limited their own control over the system they created. If they intended for the system to evolve, then the very act of setting those rules in motion meant surrendering their own power to the future. In this, we see a deeper truth about legacy, control, and the nature of power. When you create something that is meant to last, you are also creating a system in which you no longer have a place. The founding fathers may have set the stage, but they could never have foreseen how the world would change, how their ideals would be interpreted, or how their vision would evolve. Are we all bound by the systems we create, even after they have outgrown us? And, if we leave a legacy that must be altered by others, can we ever truly say we were free in our creation, or were we simply building prisons for future generations? The infinite hotel paradox. Imagine a hotel with an infinite number of rooms. Each room is occupied, filled to capacity, and yet, the hotel can always accommodate more guests. A new guest arrives, and the manager, despite the hotel being full, moves the guest to room 1. The guest in room 1 is moved to room 2, the guest in room 2 moves to room 3, and so on. Each guest is moved to the next room, and this seemingly infinite process makes room for the new guest. Now, imagine that an infinite number of new guests arrives at the hotel. How can the hotel accommodate them if it's already full? The manager moves the guest in room 1 to room 2, the guest in room 2 to room 4, the guest in room 3 to room 6, and so on, doubling the room number for each guest. This seemingly simple shift frees up all the odd-numbered rooms for the new guests. The paradox lies in this. How can a space be both full and infinite, yet always have room for more? The idea of infinity challenges everything we know about capacity, resources, and limits. If there's always room in an infinite space, then how can we ever define an end or a limit? The concept of infinity creates an unsettling reality, where you can never truly reach the end, and every addition leads to an expansion that stretches forever. What does it mean to exist in an infinite system, where boundaries don't exist, and space is eternally available? Can we truly fathom such an existence, or are we always trapped in a finite, limited reality, only able to grasp the fleeting moments before infinity swallows them whole? The infinite monkey paradox. Imagine an infinite number of monkeys sitting at an infinite number of typewriters. They begin typing, each randomly pressing keys. According to probability, eventually, one of these monkeys will type the complete works of Shakespeare, because, with infinite time and infinite monkeys, every combination of letters will eventually appear. At first glance, this seems absurd. But the paradox is this. If you give an infinite number of monkeys infinite time, then all possibilities, no matter how impossible, will eventually occur. Even the most random and chaotic events will manifest. If time and resources are limitless, then even the most improbable outcomes are guaranteed. This paradox makes you question the very nature of possibility. If the improbable is inevitable, then how can we ever truly understand the concept of chance? What does it mean for our lives, when everything, from the grandest achievements to the most trivial actions, could simply be a product of infinite randomness? Are we not just monkeys typing away in an infinite universe, desperately trying to find meaning in a world that has none? The parallel universes paradox. Imagine that every choice you make, every path you take, creates a branch in reality, a new universe. In one universe, you chose to go left. In another, you chose right. In yet another, you decided to stay put. Every action, every decision, spawns an infinite number of parallel universes, each with a different outcome. Now, consider this. If there are an infinite number of universes, each containing a different version of you, how can you ever know which one is real? The universe you experience feels like the only one, but the paradox lies in the fact that, in another universe, another version of you is experiencing a different reality. What happens when you realize that your choices are not singular, but infinite, and that every version of you is living a life that is just as real as yours? If all versions of yourself exist simultaneously, then who are you really? Are you defined by the decisions you make in this universe? Or are you just one of an infinite number of possible yous in countless parallel worlds? How can you know the true version of yourself when there are so many others just like you, each making different choices, each living a different reality? The infinite regress paradox. Imagine a line of reasoning, each argument building upon the next, creating a chain of cause and effect. But then, something disturbing happens. Each argument requires a previous argument to be valid, and that previous argument requires another, and so on, creating an infinite loop. The more you try to justify your beliefs, the the more you realize you're trapped in an endless regress, where every explanation requires yet another explanation. There is no first cause, no starting point. This is the infinite regress paradox. The paradox that arises when each explanation, each belief, each foundation you build, leads you back to an earlier question, an earlier foundation, with no end in sight. If you keep going back in time, eventually you arrive at the void, where nothing can exist because everything depends on something else. What happens when every answer leads to more questions? If every thought and belief you hold is based on something that requires further validation, then how can you ever truly know anything? The paradox isn't just philosophical, it's existential. If there is no beginning, no foundational truth, then how can you trust anything you know? Are we all just endlessly searching for something we can never find, trapped in the infinite regress of doubt? The absolute truth paradox. You are searching for truth, the absolute, unchangeable, definitive truth. But every time you think you found it, you are confronted with another truth, one that contradicts your own. If truth is absolute, then why are there so many conflicting versions of it? Every belief system, every perspective, every philosophy claims to hold the truth, but each one contradicts the other. The paradox lies in the fact that, if truth is absolute, then why can't we agree on it? The more we search for truth, the more we are faced with conflicting versions of reality, and each one feels just as valid as the last. Can there truly be one, unchanging truth? Or are we all doomed to live in a world of contradictions, unable to escape the endless maze of differing perspectives? This paradox forces us to confront the terrifying thought that maybe there is no absolute truth, but only endless layers of truths, each one just as valid as the next, each one shifting with time, culture, and perspective. If truth is not singular, then what does it mean to know anything at all? Can we ever truly know the world, or are we forever trapped in a web of competing beliefs, each pulling us further from any certainty? The self-defeating prophecy paradox. A prophecy is uttered, "You will fail." At first, it seems like a statement of truth. But then, the paradox begins to unfold. In believing this prophecy, you do everything you can to avoid failure, and in doing so, you ensure that the prophecy comes true. The paradox arises from the very nature of the prophecy. It is both self-fulfilling and self-defeating. The moment you know that failure is inevitable, your actions to avoid it only confirm its inevitability. How can you escape something that your awareness of it has already set in motion? The more you try to avoid the prophecy, the more you are drawn into its embrace. This is not just about predictions, it's about control, fate, and the illusion of free will. When faced with an unavoidable fate, how can we ever truly escape it? The very act of trying to change our future may be the one thing that locks us into the very path we dread. Are we truly free, or are we slaves to the prophecies we create for ourselves, doomed by the very knowledge of our future? The infinite loop paradox. You find yourself at the start of a never-ending cycle. You make a decision, and that decision leads to a consequence, which leads to another decision. Each choice you make seems to take you closer to an answer, but when you reach that answer, it loops back, and the process begins again. You're trapped in an infinite loop. The paradox here is that you are both the cause and the effect, the beginning and the end. Every action you take feels like it leads you toward a resolution, but the moment you believe you've resolved the issue, you find that you are simply right back where you began. The loop is never-ending, because each resolution merely feeds into the next cycle. What happens when every attempt to move forward only leads you backward? Can you ever truly make progress if every step forward only deepens your entrapment? The more you struggle to break free, the more you realize that the loop has no escape. It is your existence, your reality, and your fate, all tangled together in an infinite dance. Are you free, or are you merely repeating the same movements over and over, unaware of the loop's grip on your life? The unknowable paradox. You search for knowledge, truth, answers, meaning. But as you dig deeper into the fabric of the universe, you find that the more you know, the more you realize you cannot know. There are mysteries that evade you, questions that have no answers, and truths that are forever out of reach. The paradox lies in the fact that the more you seek to understand the world, the more you are confronted with the fundamental limit of understanding itself. The unknowable becomes not just a barrier to knowledge, but a core component of existence. It is in the gaps between what we can and cannot know that the essence of reality is hidden. What happens when you realize that knowledge itself is incomplete, flawed, and forever elusive? If there is an unknowable truth, does that make everything else you know meaningless, or does it reveal something deeper about the nature of existence? How can you trust your own perception when you are constantly confronted with the vastness of the unknown? Are we destined to live in a world where the most important truths are the ones we cannot understand? The infinite series paradox. Consider a series of numbers, 1, 1/2, 1/4, 1/8, and so on, each number being half the previous one. As you continue adding numbers, you might think that the sum will continue to grow, but the sum never reaches infinity. In fact, it always approaches a finite number, 2. Here's the paradox. You can keep adding smaller and smaller pieces forever, but you will never exceed 2. The paradox lies in the fact that you can perform an infinite number of operations, but the total result is still finite. This paradox strikes at the heart of infinity itself. If infinity is truly endless, then how can it lead to a finite result? Every moment in time, every action you take, every breath you inhale seems like it should lead to something larger, something grander, yet every effort leads you back to a limit. If the infinite is restricted to a finite outcome, then what does that say about our pursuit of the infinite? Are we forever trapped in a world of limits, no matter how far we stretch, no matter how much we divide? The perfect crime paradox. A criminal masterminds the perfect crime, no evidence, no witnesses, no way of proving guilt. The crime is executed flawlessly. But here lies the paradox. If the crime is perfect, if there is no way to uncover it, then does it even exist? The paradox emerges because the very definition of a perfect crime is one that is undetectable, leaving you questioning whether it truly happened at all. Can something be real if it can never be proven? If a crime is committed, but there is no evidence, is there any crime at all, or is it simply an act that exists only in the mind of the perpetrator? This paradox forces us to confront a disturbing truth. Does reality depend on our ability to prove it? If we cannot observe, measure, or even detect an event, does it cease to exist in the same way that things we can perceive? The paradox challenges our very understanding of evidence and reality itself. If something happens but no one sees it, can we truly say that it ever happened at all? The tragic hero paradox. You are faced with a hero, a person of great strength, honor, and potential. Yet, despite their remarkable virtues, they are doomed to a tragic fate. Their strength, their ambition, their very desire to overcome the odds becomes the cause of their downfall. What happens when the qualities that define someone's greatness are the same ones that lead to their ruin? This is the tragic hero paradox. The hero's flaws are often invisible to them, disguised as virtues or strengths. Their hubris, their pride, their overconfidence, drives them to push beyond the limits of their own understanding, to challenge forces they cannot comprehend. In doing so, they seal their own fate, but they cannot turn back. They are blind to the very forces that control them, and in this blindness, they are trapped. The question lingers, can a hero ever truly escape their own nature? Are we all doomed by the qualities we prize in ourselves, the very things we hold up as our greatest strengths? If your fate is sealed by the very traits you believe define you, then can you ever be free to change, or are you forever trapped in your own tragic arc? The ant and the elephant paradox. A tiny ant stands on the ground, looking up at the enormous elephant looming above. The ant is insignificant in comparison, yet it believes it has the power to defeat the elephant. It believes that by crawling into the elephant's ear, it can overpower the beast, drive it mad with irritation, and control it. But here's the paradox. Despite the elephant's size, strength, and power, the ant's belief in its own ability is what shapes its actions. The elephant, unaware of the ant's plans, lives on in peace, while the ant's struggle to defeat it reveals how our perception of ourselves often distorts the scale of what we face. What happens when you believe you can overcome something vastly more powerful than you, even when the odds are impossible? Is it the ant's power to believe that gives it strength, Or is it the illusion of power that ultimately traps it in an endless struggle? The paradox makes us question, how often do we see ourselves as ants, fighting against forces beyond our comprehension, convinced that we can change the unchangeable? And more unsettling still, what happens when we finally realize that we are not as powerful as we thought, and that the real struggle is not against external forces, but against our own perception of them? The lazy student paradox. A student is given a simple task, a homework assignment, a problem to solve, an exam to take. But instead of doing the work, they procrastinate, putting it off, believing that they will find a way to do it later. The paradox lies in the student's belief. The longer they wait, the easier the task will become, and the more they delay, the more likely they will succeed. But, as time passes, the student is faced with a simple truth. The more they wait, the more the task looms over them, growing larger, more complicated, and more insurmountable. The procrastination itself becomes the greatest obstacle, not the task at hand. The student's laziness feeds into their own failure. What happens when you realize that the harder you avoid a task, the more it takes over your life, until it becomes an insurmountable mountain? The longer you put it off, the more you become trapped in a cycle of self-doubt and fear. How much of our lives are consumed by tasks that we refuse to face, and how often do we let the illusion of later shape our decisions? The more we delay, the larger the mountain grows. The ring of Gyges paradox. Imagine you come across a ring, a simple golden band, but it possesses a remarkable power. It can make you invisible. With this newfound power, you can act without consequence. No one will see you. No one will know what you do. At first, you may think it's a harmless tool, a way to avoid detection, but soon, you begin to realize the full extent of its power. You can take what you want, do as you please, and there are no repercussions. The paradox of the ring of Gyges is this: if you are invisible, and no one can see you, are you still bound by the same moral codes that govern those who are visible? The more you use the ring, the more you realize. Without accountability, without the watchful eyes of others, who are you really? The temptation to use the ring for personal gain becomes overwhelming, and soon you begin to wonder. If you can do anything without being caught, then what is the true nature of your actions? Are they still moral if no one can see them? The paradox forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth. Are our actions only moral because they are visible, or do they remain moral regardless of the consequences? What happens when we can act without consequence? Is it the power to do whatever we want that corrupts us, or is it our inability to escape from the temptation of power? The bootstrap universe paradox. The bootstrap universe paradox takes us into the realm of time travel. Imagine you receive a book, a history of events that will happen in the future. You read the book, and it contains details about your life, your actions, and your decisions. You travel back in time and give this book to your past self. Your past self reads the book, and then proceeds to live out the events exactly as they are written, eventually traveling back in time to give the book to you. But here's the paradox. Who wrote the book? It seems to have no origin, no author. It exists purely because you read it, and in reading it, you set in motion a chain of events that leads to its creation. The book is both the cause and the effect, and its origin is lost in the loop of time. If everything that happens is merely the result of something that has already happened, then where does it all begin? This paradox challenges the very nature of causality and time itself. If events can be self-created, if cause and effect are interwoven in such a way that they create a closed loop, then can anything truly be said to have a beginning or an end? Are we all merely caught in loops of our own making, repeating actions that we believe are our own, but are merely echoes of decisions we've already made in the past? And if the future is already written, then can we ever be free to make our own choices, or are we simply playing our parts in a story that was already written before we even knew it? The fly in the bottle paradox. You find yourself trapped inside a sealed bottle, a fly buzzing frantically against the glass walls, desperate to escape. It hurls itself against the unyielding barrier, unable to comprehend the distance between itself and freedom. And yet, you know something the fly doesn't. The bottle's lid is right there, within reach. The paradox of the fly in the bottle is this. The solution to the fly's plight is so close, yet it cannot see it. The fly is trapped by its own perspective, Its frantic struggle against the glass prevents it from noticing that the way out is just a small turn away. The paradox reveals how we, too, are often trapped by our own limited perceptions, constantly fighting against forces that we believe are unchangeable, when the escape is already within our grasp. What happens when we realize that our struggles, no matter how intense, might be rooted in our inability to see the solution before us? How many of our own problems are created by our limited perspective, and how often do we fight against invisible barriers, unaware that the key to our escape is just beyond the edge of our perception? The forbidden fruit paradox. A tree stands before you, its branches heavy with fruit. You've been told that this fruit is forbidden, that consuming it will bring consequences beyond your understanding. The warning only deepens the allure of the fruit, and the more you hear of its dangers, the more irresistible it becomes. But here's the paradox. Why is something forbidden so enticing? The mere act of telling you not to touch it increases the desire. In forbidding it, you have already planted the seed of temptation. The fruit is forbidden, but in that very act of prohibition, its power grows. This paradox touches on the very nature of human desire and control. What happens when the very act of forbidding something creates its own allure? Are we bound to always desire what is out of reach, or is the desire itself a force we cannot escape? And worse still, what happens when you finally consume the forbidden fruit, only to find that the consequences are not what you expected, but something far deeper, something that cannot be undone? Is the temptation itself the true punishment, and is it not the consequences, but the desire for the forbidden, that truly changes us? The time dilation paradox. Imagine two twins, identical in every way. One stays on Earth, while the other travels into space at a speed close to the speed of light. The twin in space journeys for what feels like a few years, while the twin on Earth experiences decades. When the spacebound twin returns, they are young and unchanged, while the earthbound twin has aged considerably. The paradox isn't just in the aging, it's in the very nature of time itself. How can two people, the same age, experience time so differently? Time is a constant for you, a relentless, ever-moving force. But what happens when time itself bends, warps, and shifts depending on your position in the universe? This paradox forces you to confront the terrifying implications of time. If time is not absolute, if it can stretch and contract, then what does that mean for your understanding of reality? Are you truly experiencing time as it is, or are you trapped in your own perception of it, unable to understand the vast, unfathomable nature of time itself? The silent scream paradox. Imagine you are in a room, filled with people, yet no one hears a word you say. You scream out, your voice raw with emotion, but it falls upon deaf ears. Your mouth moves, but the sound is swallowed by the silence of the room. The paradox is this: you scream, but your scream is unheard. The very act of screaming is meant to be heard, to reach others, to demand attention. But here, in this paradox, the scream exists without an audience, without effect. This paradox challenges our understanding of communication, of action and reaction. What happens when you take an action, but that action goes unnoticed, unacknowledged, and unheard? You scream for justice, for understanding, but there is no one to hear your plea. You act, but your actions remain invisible, as though they never existed at all. In the silence of the scream, you begin to question: if no one hears you, do you even exist? What is the point of an action that cannot be observed, of a thought that cannot be shared? When you scream into the void, are you truly expressing yourself, or are you merely trapped in a cycle of futility, unable to make any impact on the world around you? The time traveler's dilemma paradox. You travel back in time, to a moment in your own past. You meet your younger self, and you begin to speak of the future, of events, choices, and experiences that are yet to come. But here's the paradox. What if your very act of traveling back in time and altering your younger self's path changes the future in ways you can't predict? You're faced with a dilemma. If you change one small event, do you alter the course of everything that follows? And what happens when your very presence in the past creates a ripple effect, altering the events that led to your own time travel? If you are the cause of your own existence, then where did you come from? The paradox isn't just in changing the past, It's in the very concept of cause and effect, and the unsettling realization that your actions in the present might be the very thing that created your future. Are we all merely the result of actions that have already been set in motion, with no true agency over the future? In the time traveler's dilemma, you confront the unsettling truth. If you can change the past, then what is your true role in time? Are you an actor in a play, performing a role that was written before you were born, or are you the author of your own destiny, trapped in a cycle of endless cause and effect? The oracle's prophecy paradox. An oracle, ancient and wise, delivers a prophecy: you will be defeated by your own actions. The prophecy seems inevitable, but it contains a hidden twist. The moment you hear the prophecy, you begin to act in ways that you believe will prevent it from happening. You fight against fate, trying to outsmart the oracle's prediction, but by doing so, you inevitably set into motion the very actions that fulfill it. The paradox lies in the nature of foretelling. The very act of trying to avoid a future event is what makes it come true. The prophecy is both the cause and the effect, and every attempt to escape it only draws you closer to your doom. The more you resist the prophecy, the more you ensure its fulfillment. This paradox forces us to confront a disturbing truth about destiny. Are we doomed by the very knowledge of our fate? When you know your future, can you ever truly escape it, or does the knowledge itself become the chain that binds you to that future? Is our free will nothing more than an illusion, constantly manipulated by the knowledge of what is to come? The both here and there paradox. Imagine you are in two places at once. You sit in a room, but at the same time, you find yourself standing on a mountaintop miles away. In one moment, you are reading a book, and in the next, you are walking down a street in a different city. The paradox here is this: if you are both here and there, in two separate locations, at the same time, then where are you truly? Are you in one place, or are you an amalgamation of two separate realities, existing simultaneously in parallel? This paradox disturbs the very concept of identity and location. If you exist in two places at once, then which version of you is real? Can you ever truly be in one place when the possibility of existing in multiple places shatters the very notion of a singular existence? Where do you belong when both realities are equally true? And worse still, if you are here and there, in both places and neither, can you ever truly know who you are or where you exist in the grand scheme of time and space? The all-knowing person paradox. Imagine a person who knows everything. Every event, every possibility, every outcome. They have perfect knowledge of the past, present, and future. They can predict every decision, every moment of history, and they understand the workings of the universe better than anyone else. But here lies the paradox. If this person knows everything, then is there any real choice left for them? If the future is already known, if every decision has already been made, then can they truly make a choice at all? Are they not simply puppets, controlled by the inevitability of their own knowledge? The paradox reveals a deeper truth. Does knowledge limit freedom? The more this all-knowing person understands, the more they realize that their knowledge has imprisoned them in a reality they cannot escape. If you know everything, then you are already bound by that knowledge, forever stuck in a world where no choice is ever truly free. The evolution of life paradox. Life on Earth evolves constantly. Species change, adapt, and evolve to survive in their environment. This is the nature of life, a slow, gradual progression that can be understood in terms of genetic mutations, natural selection, and survival. But here's the paradox. If life evolves in this way, then how can we ever truly know who we are or where we come from? The further back we trace our evolutionary roots, the more fragmented and uncertain the picture becomes. We are the product of countless mutations, adaptations, and selections. If life is an endless chain of change, then can we ever truly define our origins? Every organism, every species, every being is just one step in an infinite, ever-shifting process, a cycle that loops through generations without a true beginning or end. The paradox goes deeper. If life evolves constantly, can we ever truly be ourselves? Every trait we possess, every instinct we act upon, is the result of an ancient process that cannot be fully understood, only experienced. Are we merely the sum of countless, unknowable forces, shaped by evolution's infinite hand, or are we something more than the product of blind chance? The origin of the universe paradox. How did the universe begin? We look into the stars, we study the cosmic background radiation, and we use the most advanced science to try to understand how the universe began. Yet, no matter how much we know, we always hit a wall. Where did it come from? What existed before the Big Bang? The paradox of the origin of the universe lies in this. If the universe began from a singularity, a point of infinite density and heat, then what caused it to exist in the first place? If time itself began with the Big Bang, then how can we even speak of before the universe, when time itself was non-existent? This paradox challenges our most basic assumptions. Can anything have a true beginning if it exists in an infinite expanse of time and space? The origin of the universe is, in a sense, unknowable. We look for the source, the cause, the explanation, but every answer seems to lead us back to another question, another paradox. What happens when you realize that the very nature of existence cannot be explained, that every attempt to find the origin only leads to more contradictions? Are we truly free to explore our origins, or are we forever trapped in an infinite regress of causality, unable to break free from the questions that have no answers? Schrödinger's cat paradox. A cat is placed in a box, along with a vial of poison that will break if an atom decays. The atom has a 50% chance of decaying, and if it does, the poison is released, killing the cat. If the atom does not decay, the cat remains alive. Here's the paradox. Until the box is opened and the cat is observed, the cat is both alive and dead simultaneously, existing in a state of uncertainty. The moment the box is opened, the cat will either be alive or dead, but until then, it exists in both states. This paradox challenges our very understanding of reality. If something cannot be observed, does it truly exist in one state, or does it exist in multiple, contradictory states at once? Schrödinger's cat is not just about physics, it's about how we perceive the world. What happens when reality itself is both certain and uncertain, when the very nature of existence depends on whether or not we are looking? This paradox invites you to ask, if our perception shapes reality, then how much of what we experience is the result of observation, and how much is independent of us? Are we truly free to define reality, or is it defined by the limitations of our senses? The moving train paradox. A train is moving at high speed, and you are standing at the station watching it. As the train approaches, you observe a light flash from the front of the train to the back. You measure the time it takes for the light to travel from front to back, and you record a certain value. But now imagine you are on the train, moving with it. To you, the light travels a shorter distance because you are already moving with the train. Here's the paradox. How can the speed of light, which is constant, appear different to two observers in different frames of reference? The paradox lies in the fact that, according to the principles of relativity, the speed of light should be the same no matter where you are, yet your perception of the light's travel time changes depending on your own motion. This paradox forces you to confront the dissonance between perception and reality. If two observers can see the same event and yet perceive it differently, then how can we ever truly know what is real? Are we not all trapped in our own subjective realities, limited by our perspectives? What happens when the truth itself changes depending on where you stand? And how can you ever trust what you see when there is no objective viewpoint? The two stones paradox. Two stones are thrown into a pond at the same time. One stone is large and heavy, and the other is small and light. The large stone sinks almost immediately, while the small stone floats on the surface for a while. But here's the paradox. If both stones hit the water at the same time, why does one sink faster than the other? The paradox is not just about the stones. It's about the way we perceive force, motion, and nature itself. If the stones were thrown with identical force and at the same time, why do their fates differ? The answer, of course, lies in the physical properties of each stone, their density, shape, and mass. But the paradox lies in how we perceive the seemingly simple act of simultaneity when different forces are at play. What happens when two objects, seemingly equal in all respects, behave differently simply because of their inherent qualities? Are we ever truly in control of the forces that shape our lives, Or do we merely float on the surface of a larger, unseen system that we cannot understand? The greedy pig paradox. A pig is given an opportunity to eat. The more it eats, the larger and fatter it becomes. But here's the paradox. The more the pig consumes, the more it loses in the long run. By gorging itself on food, the pig eventually becomes so large and sluggish that it can no longer move efficiently, eventually harming its own survival. The greedy pig paradox illustrates the dangers of excess. By taking more than is needed, the pig ultimately ensures its own destruction. The paradox is this: greed, no matter how satisfying it may seem in the moment, leads to long-term loss. This paradox doesn't just apply to pigs. It applies to all of us. What happens when we pursue our desires without regard for the consequences, when we indulge without limit? Can we ever truly enjoy what we have, or does our greed always lead to ruin? Are we, in our quest for more, doomed to destroy the very things we seek to possess? The invisible hand paradox. In a free market, the forces of supply and demand operate under the guidance of an invisible hand. Individuals, each acting in their own self-interest, are said to unknowingly contribute to the greater good of society, with no central control, no planning. But here's the paradox. How can the selfish actions of individuals lead to a harmonious system, when the collective good seems so abstract and out of reach? The paradox lies in the invisible hand itself. If everyone is pursuing their own interests, how can a system emerge that benefits everyone? It is said that the self-interest of individuals, working in competition, leads to better outcomes for all. But this system is fragile and unpredictable. What happens when individual desires conflict, when the invisible hand is no longer guiding but instead fracturing the system? What happens when the system that we trust to be self-correcting begins to break down? If the market is driven by self-interest, then how can we ever know when the system has truly achieved balance, or if it's teetering on the edge of collapse? Is the invisible hand truly invisible, or is it simply too powerful for us to perceive? The white swan paradox. You stand before a vast flock of swans, their feathers glistening white under the sunlight. You've heard a common saying, all swans are white. This idea has been instilled in your mind through years of observation and experience. But then, a single black swan appears amidst the white ones, disrupting your belief. The paradox here is simple, yet deeply unsettling. You cannot know what you do not know, and the moment you believe you understand the world, a single contradiction can shatter your entire worldview. The presence of the black swan forces you to confront the limitations of your knowledge and how fragile the truths we hold dear truly are. This paradox applies not just to swans, but to all of life. What happens when we encounter the unexpected, the unaccounted for, that challenges everything we thought we knew? Are our beliefs truly our own? Or are they simply constructed from the assumption that the world works in the way we expect it to? Can we ever truly be certain of anything, or are we always just one unexpected contradiction away from shattering our reality? The broken mirror paradox. You look into a mirror and see your reflection, exactly the same as you expect it to be. But then, one day, the mirror cracks. The reflection that once showed your perfect image is now shattered, fragmented into pieces, and your once clear sense of self begins to distort. The paradox lies in this. The broken mirror reflects something that no longer exists as it once did, but it still reflects you, just in pieces. You may try to piece the fragments back together, but they will never match the whole again. What happens when the way you see yourself is broken, and the reflection you once knew no longer exists in the same way? This paradox questions the nature of identity. Are we whole when we see ourselves clearly, or are we just a collection of fragmented reflections, constantly shifting with time? When the mirror breaks, do you still recognize yourself, or are you left with a distorted version of who you once were? Can we ever fully understand who we are? Or are we always looking at an incomplete reflection of ourselves, broken and scattered across time? The unfolding universe paradox. The universe is vast, ever-expanding, and full of infinite possibilities. It is a place where galaxies form and die, stars are born, and planets revolve in an endless dance. But here's the paradox. If the universe is unfolding, continuously expanding, then what was there before? If the universe is constantly moving outward, Where is the center of it all? The paradox is this: if the universe is expanding in all directions, does it even have a true beginning or end? The more you try to comprehend the infinite nature of the cosmos, the more you realize there is no center, no origin, no ultimate point of reference. The universe, in all its vastness, defies the very notion of a fixed starting point. What happens when you realize that the very fabric of the universe itself is in motion, constantly shifting, expanding, and changing? Are we trapped in an endless unfolding, where every answer only leads to more questions? And if the universe is forever expanding, does it ever truly reach a state of completion? Or is it destined to unfold forever, spiraling outward into infinity? Infinity in physics paradox. Infinity is a concept that appears repeatedly in physics. There are infinite particles in the universe, infinite possibilities in quantum mechanics, and infinite distances between stars. But here's the paradox: if infinity exists in physics, can anything ever truly be understood, or is everything just an approximation of the infinitely complex? The paradox is this: how can we understand infinity if it is so vast that it cannot be fully grasped? Every equation, every theory in physics that involves infinity has its limitations. It forces us to confront the fact that the universe is beyond our comprehension, stretching far beyond the borders of human understanding. What happens when we realize that the very nature of the universe is infinite, unknowable, and boundless? Are we forever trapped in a cycle of trying to measure the unmeasurable, to calculate the incalculable? Is our understanding of reality limited only by our inability to grasp infinity? And if so, can we ever truly know the universe in its entirety? The sleeping cell paradox. Every cell in your body is alive, working tirelessly to sustain you, except for the cells that don't. There are millions of cells within you that are in a dormant state, asleep, contributing nothing to your function. But here's the paradox: if all the cells are a part of you, then are they truly asleep, or are they simply waiting for the moment to awaken and serve a new purpose? The sleeping cells seem inactive, yet they are part of a larger system, connected to your existence in ways you cannot see. They are the quiet, dormant parts of you, ready to awaken when needed. Is inactivity truly inactivity, or is it a form of latent potential? This paradox forces us to question our own dormant parts, our own unexpressed potential. How much of who we are is just waiting to be awakened, waiting for the right moment to step into action? Are we ever truly asleep, or are we simply in a state of potential, forever waiting for the catalyst to bring us to life? And if so, what happens when we are left in stasis for too long, when the dormant parts of us never awaken? The timekeeper paradox. A timekeeper, entrusted with controlling the flow of time, oversees the clock that ticks away each second of the universe's existence. But here's the paradox: if the timekeeper is the one who dictates time, then when does time begin and end? Is the timekeeper bound by the very rules they enforce, or are they free to exist outside the confines of time? The paradox unfolds when you realize that the timekeeper's existence depends entirely on time, yet time itself cannot exist without the timekeeper. What happens when the creator and the created are bound together in a symbiotic relationship, unable to exist without one another? If the timekeeper controls time, then who controls the timekeeper? And if time is controlled by someone, can it ever truly flow freely, or is it always at the mercy of a higher power? The deeper question: if time is the foundation of existence, then how can anything truly exist outside of it? Are we all bound by the ticking clock, or are we merely watching as time slips through our fingers, unable to grasp the very thing that defines us? The identity paradox. You are born into the world as one person, but over the course of your life, you change in ways that make you almost unrecognizable from your former self. Your body ages, your thoughts evolve, your experiences shape who you are. So, when you look back, is the person you were still the same person you are now? The paradox of identity lies in this: if you change so much, then at what point do you stop being you and become someone else? Is your identity fixed, or is it a fluid, ever-changing construct, shifting with every passing moment? If your memories, your cells, and your beliefs are constantly in flux, then how can you ever claim to be the same person you were years ago? What happens when you realize that the identity you hold so dear may be nothing more than an illusion, a fleeting snapshot of a constantly evolving self? Can you ever truly know who you are? Or are you always becoming someone else, someone who exists only in the now, but can never be fully grasped or understood? The false miracle paradox. A person performs a miracle, curing the sick, parting waters, bringing the dead back to life. The world marvels at their power. But here's the paradox. What if the miracle is not a true supernatural act, but a carefully orchestrated illusion? The paradox lies in the nature of belief. If the miracle appears real, does that make it any less miraculous? The miracle's effects are undeniable, yet the truth behind it, deception, manipulation, or trickery, undermines its authenticity. But what happens when the miracle is believed by so many that it becomes real? Not in the sense of divine intervention, but in the minds of the people who witnessed it. This paradox raises a disturbing question. Is belief itself powerful enough to make something real? When does perception take precedence over reality? And when can a lie be so powerful that it transforms into truth? Are we ever truly aware of what is real, or are we caught in a web of illusions that we choose to believe? The mind-body paradox. You are a mind, experiencing the world through your body. Your thoughts shape your actions, and your body moves in response to those thoughts. But here's the paradox. How can something intangible like the mind control something as tangible as the body? If your thoughts are non-physical, how do they translate into physical actions, like moving your hand or speaking a word? The paradox is this. The mind and body seem to be two distinct entities, one intangible, the other physical. Yet they are inextricably linked. When you think, you move. When you feel, you react. But the true nature of this connection is impossible to define. The mind may guide your body, but can the body, in turn, influence the mind? If the body changes, do your thoughts change too? How much of who you are is determined by your physical state, and how much is determined by your mind? This paradox forces us to confront the uncertainty of existence. Are we more than the sum of our parts? Is the mind truly separate from the body, or are they part of a single, indivisible system, constantly interacting in ways that defy our understanding? The nature of space paradox. You stand in the middle of an open field, looking at the vast expanse of space before you. The space around you feels infinite, unmeasurable, boundless. But here's the paradox. What is space, really? We perceive it as the area between objects, the emptiness in which everything exists. Yet, if space is truly empty, then how can it contain anything at all? The paradox of space lies in its very nature. How can something that seems empty contain the matter that makes up the universe? Space is not empty, it is the very fabric of the universe, the stage upon which all events take place. But if space is infinite, then how do we define its boundaries? If space is truly limitless, how can we ever know where it ends, or if it even ends at all? The deeper question is this. Is space simply an illusion, or is it something more profound, something that transcends our understanding of existence itself? How can we understand the very space we occupy when it is simultaneously the most familiar and the most unknowable aspect of our universe? The solitude paradox. You are alone in a vast universe, surrounded by the infinite expanse of space and time. At first, you enjoy the solitude, free from the noise, the chaos, the demands of others. But as time passes, something begins to shift. The more you are alone, the more you realize you are not free at all. Your solitude, once a source of peace, becomes a prison. You start to crave connection, to long for companionship, yet no matter how far you reach, you remain isolated. The paradox lies in this. Solitude, which should offer freedom and peace, eventually reveals itself as a burden. The longer you are alone, the more you are confronted with the emptiness within, and the very isolation that was once comforting becomes overwhelming. What happens when you realize that the thing you sought for comfort, the very thing that defined your existence, now traps you in a cycle of yearning for something you can't have? Is true freedom found in solitude, or is it only in the connection with others that we find our true selves? The human spirit paradox. The human spirit is often described as something unbreakable, resilient, a force that pushes us to overcome the most impossible odds. But here's the paradox. The very strength of the human spirit can only exist because it has been tested by adversity. Without challenges, without pain, without suffering, can the spirit truly grow? When we face obstacles, we feel broken, beaten down, and defeated. But in those moments of hardship, something miraculous happens. We rebuild ourselves. Each trial, each hardship, shapes us into something stronger. Yet, the paradox is clear. The human spirit is only defined by its struggles, and without struggle, there is no spirit. What does it say about us when the very essence of our strength is born from suffering? Are we only truly alive when we are tested, or is the human spirit something that exists despite the trials, a force that transcends the pain? The impossible choices paradox. Imagine standing at a crossroads, where each path before you leads to a different life, a different fate. The problem, however, isn't in choosing, it's in the fact that each choice brings its own set of consequences, each one irrevocable. If you choose path A, you lose the possibility of path B. If you choose path B, you lose the possibility of path A. The paradox lies in this. Every choice you make eliminates another reality, another version of your life. The more choices you have, the more you are confronted with the impossibility of making the perfect choice. In trying to choose what is best, you are forced to sacrifice the other possibilities, and in that sacrifice, you may lose something essential. What happens when every choice, no matter how small, leads to an infinite number of lost possibilities? Are we truly free when every choice leads us to a future we can never fully grasp? Is there such a thing as the right choice, or are we doomed to a life of endless regrets, wondering what could have been? The quantum entanglement paradox. Two particles are entangled, separated by vast distances, yet whatever happens to one happens to the other, instantaneously. One particle can be on one side of the universe, the other on the opposite side, and when the first is affected, the second mirrors it in perfect unison. The paradox is this. How can two particles, separated by such distance, remain connected in such a way that they respond to each other instantaneously, defying the known laws of physics? This is the quantum entanglement paradox. In a universe defined by the speed of light, where no information can travel faster than light, these particles communicate faster than anything we can comprehend. If the entangled particles can influence each other across the cosmos without any delay, then what does this say about the very nature of space and time? The deeper question here, if particles can be connected across space in ways we cannot understand, what does it mean for our own sense of separation, of distance, of individuality? If everything in the universe is interconnected in ways we cannot perceive, then how much of our own lives are governed by forces beyond our control, beyond our understanding? Are we as disconnected as we believe, or is everything bound together in ways we can't even imagine? The rational agent paradox. A rational agent makes decisions based on logic, reason, and the best available information. This agent is expected to act in a way that maximizes their benefit, to always make the optimal choice. But here's the paradox. What happens when a rational agent's very logic leads them to act in ways that are detrimental to their own well-being? If the agent is rational, then they should always make the best choice. But what happens when the best choice is not immediately clear, or when information is incomplete? Does the very act of trying to make the right choice lead to the wrong outcome? The agent, locked in a cycle of rationality, might end up overthinking every decision, paralyzed by the endless possibilities and consequences. The paradox forces us to confront the limitations of rationality. Are we truly free to act logically, or do we become prisoners of our own reasoning, trapped in a loop of analysis that prevents us from ever truly moving forward? Can we ever truly be rational, or are we always influenced by the chaos of uncertainty, where even the best decisions have unintended consequences? The determinism paradox. Imagine that every moment of your life, every choice you make, is predetermined. The course of your existence, from birth to death, was already mapped out the moment the universe began. Every decision you think you make is simply the unfolding of events that were set into motion long before you were born. What does it mean for free will if everything you do is determined by forces beyond your control? The paradox of determinism lies in this. If everything is preordained, then can you ever truly be held accountable for your actions? You think you are making decisions, but in reality, the path you walk was already decided. The choices you believe you control are merely the product of an unalterable chain of events. What happens when you realize that, no matter what you do, your actions are simply echoes of a distant past? Are we truly free, or are we just following a script written for us long ago? And if we cannot change the future, then how can we ever know if we are truly living, or merely acting out the illusion of choice? The hierarchical society paradox. In every society, there is a hierarchy. People rise to positions of power, wealth, and influence, while others remain at the bottom, struggling to survive. The paradox is this: a society that thrives on hierarchy, where some have more and others have less, is often the same society that claims to value equality and fairness. The paradox becomes clear when you ask, how can a system that prides itself on equality continue to exist when it is fundamentally built on inequality? Those at the top claim that everyone has the same opportunities, yet the reality is that society's structure creates barriers that limit access to success for many. The more you strive for equality, the more you realize that true equality is a concept that may never be fully realized within the constraints of a hierarchical system. This paradox forces you to confront the uncomfortable truth. Are we truly free to succeed, or are we merely products of a system that benefits the few at the expense of the many? In a world that prides itself on fairness, how can we ever escape the chains of inequality that bind us? The blind watchmaker paradox. A watch is a beautifully intricate mechanism, with gears, springs, and dials working together in perfect harmony. If you find such a watch in the forest, you would assume it was designed by an intelligent creator. But here's the paradox. What if the watch was never designed at all, but instead, it formed naturally from a series of random events? This paradox challenges the idea that complex structures must have a designer. What happens when you realize that complexity can arise without intention, that order can emerge from chaos? The idea of the blind watchmaker, a concept championed by Richard Dawkins, suggests that natural selection, a process without foresight or intent, can produce life forms as complex as the human eye or the human brain. The paradox lies in this. If complexity can arise without design, then how can we ever truly know what is designed and what is the product of random chance? Can we trust our perception of order when it might simply be an illusion created by an indifferent, blind process? The human experience paradox. Human beings experience the world through a filter of consciousness, with our perceptions shaped by senses, thoughts, and emotions. But here's the paradox. How can we, as individual beings, ever truly know what the world is like outside of our own experience? The world is an abstract concept, shaped by our own minds, yet we act as if it is objective and fixed. What happens when you realize that your experience of the world is fundamentally subjective? Every color you see, every sound you hear, every emotion you feel is a personal interpretation of external stimuli. Can you ever truly know another person's experience, or are you trapped in the confines of your own perception, forever isolated from others? This paradox reveals the limitations of human understanding. If the world is filtered through our senses, then how much of what we know is true, and how much of it is just a projection of our minds? Are we ever truly experiencing reality, or are we forever confined to our own inner worlds? The immortal soul paradox. The idea of an immortal soul is one that has persisted through centuries of human thought. The soul is said to live on after death, untouched by the ravages of time and decay. But here's the paradox. If the soul is immortal, then what happens when it lives forever? If the soul never dies, does it retain its identity, its sense of self? What happens when eternity stretches on indefinitely? Does the soul change with time, or does it become a stagnant, unchanging entity? The paradox is that immortality, rather than being a gift, might become a burden, endless time with no end, no purpose, no growth. What happens when immortality forces the soul into an eternal existence, where everything loses meaning? Can something live forever without losing its essence, or does the very nature of eternal life erode the soul's identity? And if the soul is eternal, then what does death mean? Is it just a transition, or does it mark the end of an existence that is destined to be a mere illusion? The uncertainty paradox. You wake up in a world full of infinite possibilities. Every decision, every action leads to an unpredictable future. The paradox arises here. The more you try to control or predict your future, the more uncertain it becomes. The very attempt to find certainty creates the opposite, a deeper sense of unpredictability. The paradox is not in uncertainty itself, but in the human desire to avoid it. The more we try to eliminate the unknown, the more we realize that uncertainty is not something to be solved, but something we must live with. Our desire to control our lives, to know what will happen next, only deepens the mystery and chaos. What happens when you come to accept that the only certainty in life is uncertainty? If we can never truly know the future, then are we free? Or are we doomed to walk through life with blindfolded eyes, trying to make sense of a world that cannot be understood? And if uncertainty defines our existence, can we ever truly grasp what is real, or are we always grasping at shadows? The magic trick paradox. A magician performs an incredible trick. A coin disappears, a rabbit emerges from a hat, and the audience is left in awe. But here's the paradox. The more amazing the trick, the less you understand how it was done. You know it's an illusion, but the illusion is so perfect that it becomes more real than reality itself. The paradox lies in this. The more you seek the truth behind the trick, the more elusive it becomes. The magic trick isn't just about deception, it's about perception. The magician has created a reality within reality, so complete that you are no longer certain where the illusion ends and reality begins. What happens when you realize that the things you perceive as real may just be clever illusions, carefully crafted to make you believe in a truth that doesn't exist? Are we not all, in some way, performing a magic trick, deceiving ourselves into believing that the world is more predictable and understandable than it really is? The impossible dream paradox. You dream of achieving something that seems impossible, climbing the tallest mountain, achieving the most prestigious award, finding the truth of the universe. But here's the paradox. The more impossible the dream seems, the more you feel compelled to pursue it. And with each step closer, you begin to wonder, is it the dream that defines you, or is it the pursuit of the impossible that gives your life meaning? The paradox lies in the fact that the dream itself may be unattainable, but in the pursuit of it, you find purpose. Is the dream important because it's achievable, or because it challenges you to grow beyond your limits? And what happens when you reach the point where the dream is no longer impossible, but still remains distant, forever out of reach, just as your understanding of it deepens? When the dream seems impossible, does the pursuit of it transform you, or does it leave you hollow, with only the distant echo of a goal that was never meant to be achieved? Is the dream itself a metaphor for human existence, forever unreachable, and yet the very pursuit of it gives us the drive to live? The computer algorithm paradox. You create a computer algorithm designed to solve problems, to find patterns, to make decisions based on the data it is given. The algorithm works, it predicts, it calculates, and in a sense, it becomes more efficient as it processes more data. But here's the paradox. The more the algorithm learns, the more it begins to make decisions that humans cannot understand. The paradox is that the algorithm, which was designed to help humans, may eventually surpass human understanding. It finds patterns that are hidden from us, makes decisions that seem perfectly logical, but to us, they appear arbitrary, even alien. The more we program the algorithm, the less we understand it. What happens when the tool we create to aid us becomes something we cannot control, cannot predict, and cannot understand? Are we still the creators, or are we now being guided by the very machine we built? This paradox forces us to ask, is intelligence truly ours, or is it an illusion, one that we may lose control of as we build systems more powerful than our own minds? The simple solution paradox. You're faced with a problem, a complex challenge that seems overwhelming. You try to solve it with intricate plans, countless strategies, and an array of complicated solutions. But then, someone else steps in and offers a simple solution, one so simple, it almost seems ridiculous. And yet, the simple solution works. The paradox arises in the fact that the simplest solutions often seem too obvious to be true. We spend so much time searching for complicated answers that we overlook the elegance of simplicity. The paradox here is that the solution was always there, waiting, but we couldn't see it because we were trapped by the complexity we created. What happens when you realize that the most complicated problems might have the simplest answers? Are we so entrenched in our need for complexity that we miss the truth when it is staring us in the face? And how often do we overcomplicate our lives, searching for answers that are right there, if only we could embrace the simple solution? The subjective reality paradox. You walk through a world of sights, sounds, and experiences, and as you perceive these, they are filtered through your mind, shaped by your senses, and colored by your emotions. The paradox is this: what if your reality is not the same as anyone else's? Every person experiences the world differently, through different perceptions, memories, and emotions. So how can any of us truly know what the world is when it is shaped entirely by our individual experiences? The paradox deepens when you realize that your understanding of reality is inherently subjective. The colors you see, the sounds you hear, and even the feelings you have are unique to you. How can you trust your perception of the world when it is just a construct created by your mind? If no two people experience reality in the same way, then how can we ever know what is truly real? What happens when you realize that reality itself is an illusion, shaped by your mind and your experiences, and that everyone around you is living in their own version of the same world? Are we all just trapped in individual bubbles, unable to truly connect with anyone else's experience? The objectivity of morality paradox. Morality is often considered the foundation of human society: right and wrong, good and evil, justice and injustice. But here's the paradox: if morality is supposed to be objective, then why do we have such diverse beliefs about what is morally right or wrong? What one culture considers a moral duty, another might see as an atrocity. If morality is based on an objective truth, then how can we explain such vast differences in moral codes across societies? The paradox deepens when we consider that morality is often seen as a fundamental part of human nature, yet the very idea of a universal, objective morality seems impossible to define. If morality can't be agreed upon universally, then can we ever know what is truly right or wrong? Are we simply guided by the moral frameworks of the societies in which we are raised? Or is there a true, objective moral standard to which we are all bound? This paradox forces us to confront a disturbing question. If morality is subjective, then does anything truly have intrinsic value? Can we live with the knowledge that what we consider right might just be an illusion, shaped by culture and circumstance rather than objective truth? The perfect partner paradox. You seek a partner, someone who understands you, shares your values, and complements your strengths and weaknesses. The idea of a perfect partner is idealized in stories, movies, and society. But here's the paradox: the more you search for the perfect partner, the more you realize that perfection itself is unattainable. No one is flawless, and the very concept of a perfect partner means that they must meet every one of your desires, which is inherently impossible. The paradox is in the pursuit itself. By seeking someone who meets every expectation, you might overlook the beauty of imperfection, the very qualities that make us human. The perfect partner is not just someone who aligns with all your ideals, but someone who is willing to grow with you, to challenge you, and to support you in ways that cannot be predicted or planned. What happens when you realize that the pursuit of perfection might be the very thing that prevents you from finding true happiness? Can you truly find love, or are you simply chasing an ideal that cannot exist? The future self paradox. You look ahead to the person you will become, the future version of yourself, with all the knowledge, experience, and wisdom you hope to acquire. But here's the paradox: the future self is both you and not you. It is shaped by the decisions you make now, but it is also defined by experiences and choices you have not yet encountered. The very person you want to become exists only in a future you cannot yet predict, and it will be influenced by the decisions you make today. The paradox deepens when you realize that the person you are now is also the person you will be. You are both the same and different, constantly evolving but always tethered to the present moment. How can you know what your future self will want, will need, or will think when you are constantly changing, constantly becoming? What happens when you realize that you can never truly know the person you will be, but you must trust the choices you make today to guide you there? Is the future self an illusion? Or are you already the person you will become, living in the present, just waiting to unfold? The role of fate paradox. You are born into the world with a sense of destiny, a belief that everything that happens to you, every challenge, every victory, is part of a grand plan. But here's the paradox. If fate exists, then do we have any real control over our lives? Are we simply following a path that was set for us long ago? Or do we have the power to carve our own destinies? The paradox is that fate and free will are often at odds with each other. If fate exists, then how can we be responsible for the choices we make? But if we are truly free, then how does fate fit into the picture? The more you try to reconcile the two, the more you find that the very idea of fate seems to undermine the possibility of real choice. What happens when you realize that you are caught between two opposing forces? One that says everything is predestined, and one that says you control your own fate. Can you ever truly be free if fate looms over you, or are you simply a pawn in a game where you have no control over the outcome? The limits of the mind paradox. The human mind is capable of incredible feats, solving complex problems, imagining far-off futures, and creating art that transcends the ordinary. But here's the paradox. The mind, in all its brilliance, is limited by the very structure that defines it. You can imagine an infinite universe, but you cannot truly grasp infinity. You can ponder the deepest truths of existence, but you can never fully understand them. The paradox lies in this. The very tool we use to understand the world, our mind, is incapable of understanding the vastness of the world itself. The mind can explore, hypothesize, and create, but it is ultimately bound by its own finite nature. What happens when you realize that the very tool you rely on to understand the universe is not up to the task? The mind that seeks to explain everything is unable to fully comprehend its own limits. Are we forever trapped in our own minds, trying to make sense of a world that is too vast, too complex to truly understand? The infinity in time paradox. Time stretches on, endless and unyielding, marking every moment, every event with its passage. But here's the paradox. If time is infinite, how can we ever define a true beginning or end? Time flows in one direction, and yet, if it is infinite, there is no ultimate starting point, no final moment. Every moment exists within an endless continuum, with no true origin or conclusion. The paradox deepens when you realize that an infinite past would mean everything has already happened, and an infinite future means that nothing truly matters. If time is limitless, does it lose its significance? Is the passage of time merely an illusion, a byproduct of our perception, when in truth, all moments are already contained within the infinite stretch of eternity? What happens when you confront the fact that time is both infinite and fleeting, an endless stretch of moments that we can never truly grasp? Can you ever truly live in the present when the past and future are both endless, and your place in time is only a blip in the vast continuum? The invisible world paradox. You walk through the world, surrounded by objects and people, by nature and technology, but you only see a fraction of what exists. Beneath the surface, there is a world that is invisible to your eyes. Atoms, subatomic particles, and energies that define the very fabric of existence. The paradox is this. What if everything you see is only a small part of a much larger, invisible world? The invisible world is not just metaphorical. It exists on a level beyond your perception, and yet, it controls everything that happens in the visible world. The forces that govern the movement of galaxies, the behavior of molecules, and the very structure of reality itself are hidden from you, yet they shape everything you experience. What happens when you realize that the reality you see is just a tiny fragment of what exists, and the forces that drive everything are beyond your comprehension? Can you ever truly know the world when so much of it lies in the invisible, out of reach, yet fundamental to your very existence? The eternal recurrence paradox. You live your life, making decisions, taking actions, and moving through time. But here's the paradox. What if you are destined to live your life over and over again, eternally repeating the same actions, choices, and events? The idea of eternal recurrence suggests that everything, every moment, every choice, will eventually be repeated infinitely. The paradox lies in this. If your life were to repeat endlessly, would it lose its meaning? If every joy, every sorrow, every success and failure were doomed to occur again and again, would it still hold significance? Could you ever break free from the cycle of repetition, or are you doomed to endlessly repeat your life, trapped in an unbroken loop? What happens when you realize that the very nature of your existence might be a loop, where every choice you make leads to the same inevitable outcome? Are you free to change, or is your life just a series of repetitions, repeating until the end of time? Can you ever truly escape the cycle, or are you forever bound to repeat the past, locked in eternal recurrence? The God's existence paradox. You are told that God exists, an all-powerful, all-knowing, benevolent being who created the universe and watches over it. But here's the paradox. If God is all-powerful, then why is there suffering in the world? If God is all-knowing, then why does he allow injustice? And if God is benevolent, why does he not intervene to prevent the pain and evil that exist in the world? The paradox deepens when you consider that if God is truly all-knowing, then he must have known about the suffering of mankind from the very beginning. If he created the world, why would he create one with so much pain, confusion, and conflict? The very attributes of God, the qualities that make him divine, create a contradiction that seems impossible to resolve. What happens when you confront the fact that the very nature of God, the divine being who is supposed to be perfect, may be fundamentally incompatible with the world he has created? Can we ever understand God's existence when the paradox of suffering and benevolence defies logic? Are we caught in a world created by a being whose nature we cannot comprehend, forever questioning his existence and our place in the grand scheme of things? The decaying universe paradox. The universe is vast, filled with stars, galaxies, and countless wonders. But here's the paradox. The very universe that is teeming with life and motion is also in the process of decaying. Stars burn out, galaxies drift apart, and entropy slowly erodes the order of existence. Eventually, everything will fall into a state of disorder, a heat death, where no energy remains to sustain life or motion. The paradox lies in this. The universe is both alive and dying at the same time. Every moment of growth and change is coupled with the inevitable decay that follows. As life blooms, it is already in the process of decaying. The cycle is unbreakable, a constant tension between creation and destruction. What happens when you realize that the universe, in all its beauty, is doomed to collapse? Can life truly flourish when its existence is guaranteed to be temporary? If everything we know is slowly falling apart, does it make the present moment more precious, or does it make everything seem futile? The life and death paradox. Life is precious, fleeting, and beautiful, and yet, it is always shadowed by death. The paradox is this. In order to live, we must be aware of death, and in our awareness of death, we live. The concept of death shapes our existence. It gives meaning to our experiences, challenges, and relationships. But the deeper paradox is this. If death is the inevitable end of life, then is life truly meaningful, or is it only meaningful because of death? What happens when we realize that our very awareness of our mortality shapes the way we live? Is life valuable because it is finite, or is the very concept of death the thing that gives our lives purpose? The paradox forces you to confront an unsettling reality. If we are constantly moving toward death, can we ever truly appreciate life? Or are we caught in a cycle where the fear of death drives us to live, but it is the knowledge of death that keeps us from truly living? The eternal return paradox. Imagine that you are condemned to live the same life over and over again, eternally. Every decision you make, every action you take, will be repeated endlessly, with no variation. You may live your life in happiness, sadness, or indifference, but no matter what you choose, you will eventually find yourself at the same point again, destined to relive it. The paradox here is, if you are destined to live the same life infinitely, can you ever truly live, or are you just a prisoner of your past actions? The more you try to change your future, the more you realize that it will always be the same. There is no escape, no final resolution. Can you find meaning in a life that repeats, or does repetition strip away the very essence of existence? What happens when you realize that you are caught in a loop, forever reliving the same moments, the same choices, with no chance of ever breaking free? Does life become meaningless when every moment feels predetermined and repetitive? Or is the paradox of eternal recurrence itself a call to live with greater purpose, knowing that every action, every decision, is truly the only one that matters? The time paradox. Time moves forward, at least, that's what we've been told. But here's the paradox. If time is an ever-flowing river, constantly moving forward, how can we change the past or predict the future? If the future is yet to come, how can we prepare for it? And if the past is gone, how can we be certain that it ever truly existed? The paradox deepens when you realize that the past, present, and future are inextricably linked. But no matter how hard we try to grasp one, we can never truly hold on to it. The more we try to control time, the more we realize that time controls us. It is both our constant companion and our greatest adversary. What happens when you confront the truth that time is both the most powerful and the most elusive force in existence? Can we ever truly understand time, or are we forever bound to live in its flow, like leaves in a stream, unable to alter its course? The absurd paradox. Life is full of meaning, purpose, and goals, yet no matter how hard we try, we are often confronted with the inevitable truth. Life is absurd. The universe, in all its vastness, seems indifferent to our struggles, our desires, and our suffering. The paradox is this: how can we live in a world that appears to have no inherent meaning, while still searching for meaning in everything we do? The paradox lies in the tension between our desire for purpose and the universe's indifference. We want our lives to have meaning, but we are confronted by the absurdity of existence, an existence that doesn't offer us the answers we seek. The more we search for meaning, the more we are confronted with the fact that meaning is a construct we create for ourselves, not something inherent in the universe. What happens when you realize that life, in all its absurdity, might be the most real part of existence? Can we ever truly escape the paradox of searching for meaning in a world that offers none? Or do we find our greatest purpose in accepting the absurdity itself?